Welcome to Rebecca Sounds Reveille. Today on the show, we are bringing back a guest, Luca Majno. He is the audio video technical director here for the Liberty Beacon. And he was talking about quite a few things last week. One of the things that we were talking about was a matriarchal society, and we were going to also talk about the patriarchal society. We didn't have a lot of time left in the last show. However, we're going to go ahead and delve right into the topics that not only that we were discussing last week to give you a recap, but also to expand upon this other part of what he wants to share with you. So welcome, Luca.
How you doing? And it's a pleasure and an honor to be on your show. And we're sounding Reveille in a big way. I just thought it would be a really good idea for people who didn't see part one to just go over very quickly what we discussed in last week's show, if that's okay. Okay, we covered the fact that the powers that be simply don't care about the people, and that's something that we proudly and obviously prove, as most people know. All they have to do is look around them and find out what's really going on. We covered Rothschild Zionism, which has been around. I've been tracing it since 1750. The Patriarchal Society. We covered 9/11, the 9/11 memorial as well. That was a gift from Israel, and the 9/11 lie. Christopher Bolin and David Icke do a fabulous job for people who want to watch videos on that. We covered the intel whistleblower that also said that every single terrorist attack in this country, America, was a false flag. And we touched on some of them, like 9/11, Pearl Harbor, and others. And by the way, for those who don't know, according to Ted Gunderson, the ex-FBI chief who was poisoned to death, quote, an unexploded bomb with the U.S. Army stamp on it was taken out of the Oklahoma City building after the bombing. We covered thoughts by Edward Bernays, the father of propaganda, Aldous Huxley, Einstein, Paul Harvey. We also had a clip from Paul Harvey. And they're among the seers and thinkers that were really trying to warn us about what was coming. And I also found a good screenshot that said that the U.S. has killed more than 20 million people in 37 victim nations since World War II. We covered Rockefeller, who's responsible for not only destroying our food, but also our health and our education system, and Monsanto keeps that going with the fake foods and with the poisoning of the planet. These people that are doing the damage, these patriarchs that are destroying all life and health, they're all puppets for the Rothschild agenda. To add to the confusion, to create chaos, as the Latin phrase says, ordo ab chaos, which is basically to create chaos out of the order that they want and that they promote, which is the New World Order in this case. There's other tactics that we could talk about. It's pretty long, but very basically, there's problem, reaction, solution that you can look into, and it's all basically, they're anti-human principles. They're basically to create chaos, and you already have something planned for the public when they freak out over it. So you have the problem, the reaction, and the solution already thought of in advance. They basically do this because most of us don't know about what they're doing. The word government itself is really interesting. If you work at the word govern and meant, I could see you want to say something.
Well, what I was thinking, I'll address the comment that you just made, and it's not everyone that's involved with government or those who really have a goal to help people. But what I'm hearing, and based on our conversation last week, is that there is an interconnected sort of map, if you will, of the agenda, and that gets played out. And there's a lot of people that are not only misled in government and in politics, but as well as people who are not aware of what's going on. And so what was really very paramount in the conversation that we had was to fact check. People need to be able to know what's going on, but not hear it and just believe it, but to fact check. And one of the things that you even said within the own statements that you make is go ahead and fact check what I'm telling you. And
don't believe us, right?
Yes, and I thought that was very interesting. And some of the things that you had shared with the audience last week was one of such things, that the sort of interconnected plan was that certain countries needed to end up at war for some of the outcomes to happen. And one of them was Syria. And right after we recorded the show, we ended up sending some missiles over there, and that ended up happening. So while that isn't in its totality 100% supportive of what you're telling people to fact check, I thought it was very, very interesting that it did happen. And so there's more, though, that you have, because you're talking about two different types of societies and how it's and how they're governed. And I think that's where you were going with govern and then meant. Would that be correct?
Actually, as it says, govern and meant is simply government controlling the mind. That's what the word means. And you touched on something really important too, that a lot of people don't know about what's going on, and that's the case with a lot of people that went to war thinking that they were doing something heroic and they were doing something good for the country, and you end up finding out that the United States is one of the biggest terrorist organizations on the planet. This is all about the destruction of human life, of everything natural and everything that goes along with it. It's basically control. And look no further than right outside your door. You have the destruction of the environment. You have the destruction of the forest, poisoning of the water, our food, our health, our air, the neglect of the neglect of infrastructure, and it's just there's so many things. And you find out that the United States is simply helping in Israel's agenda, which is the Greater Israel Project. It's called Eretz Israel, from the Euphrates down to the Nile River, and to totally obliviate the Middle East. And we're helping them do it. And Syria is next. And this is the plan.
Syria
just
is
like
next as
far as just destroying it, to take control over it. And this, like 9/11 and all the other events that we've had in this country, were ordered and orchestrated by the Rothschild Zionist dynasty. This is basically what General Wesley Clark had outlined for us in the video that we showed in part 1. And a lot of people are waking up to this. A lot of people are seeing what's going on. A lot of people that want to put integrity before money and power, people before profit. And you can see it really clearly also in the medical and the pharmaceutical, the political, the military industries. Even a big pharma exec comes out saying publicly that, hey, we're here for the money. We're not here to cure people. And this is what I wanted to get at with the matriarchal society. It's exactly the opposite.
Okay.
It's like turning everything that's going on its head.
Okay.
Matriarchal societies were, that's the one thing the church and state have done their best to destroy through the years. And the obvious proof of that is the 100 million people that they killed since 1492. This is the agenda that has been going on in North America. And, you know, it's not women like Hillary. I want to say this again. It's not like Hillary Clinton, okay? But we're talking about matriarchs. We're talking about right-thinking women who think of the next 7 generations unborn.
Okay.
Through my research and active living among the original people of this land, taking part in sacred ceremonies, taking part in talking circles, in fasts, I can see where all this is going. It's good versus evil. It's just like those movies. You know, it really is. In my conferences, I keep talking about, and we said this last week, I just wanted to say this again very quickly. You know, you draw a line right down the blackboard, and you put patriarch on one side and matriarch on the other. Okay. And the representations of each are polar opposite. And I had some of the kids in the classroom, their mouth just dropped, you know. And examples would be like, you know, ego versus eco, war versus peace, love versus hate, apathy versus empathy. They're complete opposites. Mm-hmm. And the original people here on Turtle Island, which is North America, call them what you want. Native Americans, Indians, First Nations. They were the caretakers of the land for tens of thousands of years. The women were in charge in a lot of the tribes. That's where matriarchal comes from. And the men knew their place in the woman's world. Okay. In those tribes, the women owned the lodges. The women were the powerful ones on the war councils, on the gatherings. They were the decision makers. There was never anything done without the approval or the consent of the women. The men had their fasts and their sweat lodges. Okay. The women never needed that because they were being purified once a month by nature.
I see. Okay.
There's a lot of it's so interesting once you get into it. A lot of people are still saying, like I do, that women are superior to men in a lot of ways. And it's not demeaning of men at all. I want to be clear on that. Men just knew what they had to do. They were the hunter-gatherers, they were the protectors, they were the warriors. But unfortunately today, the patriarchal society has been set up by church and state to put the women under the man's boot. There's, you know, if you look at the old commercials about smoking or, you know, or about how nice it is to have a woman in the house, there's actual pictures of the woman's head being the part of the carpet and the man has his boot on her face. You know, there's a lot of really, we're showing that. And there's a lot of interesting clips and things like that. At one point, I was actually blessed to unearth this Catholic Church manual for women in the household, which further proves my point. And if you listen to movies really closely, like the Da Vinci Code, you'll hear them talking about suppressing women, about the healers, the medicine people who were strong enough to cause problems for the church, and the Malleus Maleficarum, it's called, the witch's hammer. They even talk about that in the movie. And, you know, they went on rampages, you know, killing women left, right, and center because they were a threat to the church.
Okay. So that, you know, I was not aware of. But so for the audience who is thinking in terms of matriarchal and patriarchal now, so what would be different if society was then in a matriarchal society?
There wouldn't be any wars. There'd be a lot of countries pissed off at each other, but there wouldn't be any wars. Women wouldn't allow that. Women wouldn't allow billions to be sent to Israel to destroy other countries. Women wouldn't accept homeless people, sickness, disease, infrastructure, you name it. Everything that we're living today would not be tolerable. It's as simple as that.
So for those who might be listening and they would be thinking, well, that's a sort of a feministic or feminism type of mentality. Would that be correct, or is there something that is defining it as different?
No, see, that's what I was saying. In these sort of societies, you know, men were honored to be of service. we're going to get close to that. We're going to get into that shortly. It was about being of service to other people. It's not about putting yourself first. Today we go 30 miles across town to visit our friends, but we don't know who lives next door.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a completely different setup, and men were actually proud to be living in it. Let me just give you a few examples. Like in Indian culture, you never interrupted a woman when she spoke.
Okay.
Ever. That was one of the biggest no-nos. And when you came up to two people that were talking, you never walked through them. You always walk around them.
Okay.
Because you don't want to interrupt with their sharing that's most sacred to them, which is their voice, themselves. It's different things like that. I've got scolded a few times in my beginnings because I had to learn the hard way. It's about giving thanks to Mother Earth for life, for sustenance, and for everything. Everything's backwards today, and there's no balance. You know how people are saying there's no balance in life today, and there's a very good
on a global level or on a country specific, like the United States or America.
I just unearthed another link of mine that proves that matriarchal societies are living today. The one in Brazil, the ones that the Brazilian governments are destroying in the Amazon. That's another really good example. I think I shared that with you on Messenger earlier. This shaman, this woman talks about the loss of balance. She talks about the planes going overhead, the stuff falling from the skies that are poisoning everybody. And it's going along with the same idea that we're talking about. It's how the right-thinking women would run the world, and how men are just simply, I should say, unbalanced or irresponsible men in charge are destroying it.
Okay.
I just want to give you a good example. Can I just tell you a quick story?
Sure.
About respecting Mother Earth?
Sure.
It's called the spirit plate, and it's not very long. And when I had to do with that, when I saw that the first time, I literally cried. I wept. If you picture a bingo hall full to the rafters with people,
okay,
and you have the buffet at the back, the oldest person in the room, whether male or female, it doesn't matter, he or she gets up, and when he does or she does, everybody gets up. And they stop talking. You can hear a pin drop, and everybody knows what it is. It's like going to church for the Catholic person or for the person with their own belief system.
Okay.
And they know it's time, so they don't say a word. And if the baby's crying, they just let him cry, and that's fine. But the oldest person in the room goes up, gets a paper plate, and takes a little bit of everything that they're going to eat, puts it in the plate. If it's noodles, he takes one noodle. If it's rice, he takes a few grains.
Okay.
If it's lettuce or salad, he'll take a little bit of the salad, a little bit of everything in the plate. It doesn't have to be a lot. And everybody's still standing. He goes outside and says a prayer, holds up the plate, puts it down by the nearest tree, says a prayer, comes back in, and as soon as he or she sits down, everything goes back to normal. Everybody talks, and everything keeps going. Okay. It's 10,000 years old. It's one of those things. They want to give back to nature what nature gives us. And you look at today, in America, I'm getting goosebumps here. And in America, we waste 40% of our food.
That's a huge amount.
We throw it away.
That's an absolutely huge amount. And why do you think that is, that there's such a high amount of waste?
It's just no respect. We're taught by government that doesn't respect themselves, just like parents to children. We're taught not to care. There's so many examples. All we have to do is look around us. Just recently, I came across a post on social media 2 days ago, as a matter of fact. And the Native Americans have a really, really good line for this. The meme shows an officer who's got a serious look on his face, and he's looking around. And the meme says, if we're not comfortable with emotion, every emotion becomes discomfort. And everything uncomfortable in an uncomfortable situation becomes a threat automatically. And the Indian nations have a perfect meme for that. They say that if you're, you should go to the forest. And if you're not afraid of the forest will not be afraid of you.
Okay.
Imagine going to the forest and sitting down for a couple of hours. All of a sudden you see salamanders coming around, you see squirrels coming around, you see birds coming around. But if you're afraid of the forest, there'll be the people or the entities in the forest, the animals in the forest, they'll be afraid of you too. And what we fear, we tend to destroy. And that's exactly what we're doing. It's exactly what we're doing today.
Okay.
We're destroying the forest. We're destroying everything. So it's the polar opposite of what we started this show with. It's about taking care of one another. It's about respect for one another. You put yourself last. And there's another good example. Some people saw the movie The Last of the Mohicans.
Okay.
The guy's name was Uncas, and he was Mohican, and he has a perfect line for that. He says, "This heart of mine is not mine, it's yours."
So to really find solutions then in the society that we have, where there isn't a system of what you're talking about, hate and fear, you're talking about balancing the two types of societies. And so that would be integrating both men and women and utilizing the best methods to create something very healthy and peaceful from that.
Yes, exactly. See, you have a man who's beating his wife, which you see almost every day. And the children are looking at that. The children and the family are watching the man being violent to their mother. So that's how they grow up. It's a system of and it keeps repeating it. It keeps repeating itself. And the kid growing up doesn't know what he's doing wrong. Hey, my parents did that. There's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely. The household is your boot camp for future relationships and for future choices that you make, because you do what you see, what you've been trained to do, and how to respond. So 100%, I'm in agreement with you on that. And the biggest question that people are faced with is, how do we get that to stop? And so you have an opinion on that.
As we talked about in the first part, I don't like to use opinion. I like to use fact, the word fact, because everybody has an opinion. But if you really research hard and you're determined to find the best of you and to be able to be of service to everybody else, it becomes clear. It's not your opinion, it's fact. This is it. This is the truth. And those two entities that we're talking about, let's say the wife beater and the man who really respects his wife, they can't live together. They can't coexist. It's like the fish trying to talk to the oil tanker.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you a perfect example of that. This year, we saw Standing Rock. We saw the aggression at Standing Rock. Perfect example. Look what they did to unarmed, praying water protectors. And then they lied about it, They've done the same for centuries. This is attempted extermination, and it's genocide here and elsewhere. Australia, India, Britain's been at this for a long time.
So
it's
the analogy that you're using, Luca, then, is that you have a victim and an abuser. And so regardless whether it is an at-home sort of interpersonal relationship, the analogy is that to a society and its people.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay, I got it.
It's the same sort of thing. It's a violent person that, he can't relate to a person like me who's, I can't hurt a fly. I have a hard time killing a fly, The two have a really hard time relating. And like you said, it's trying to mend the hole between us, the fact that we're so unbalanced. America, just to give an example at Standing Rock, I really, really want to say this because a lot of people are saying that America is an oil company with an army, which is basically what we're doing. We're a corporation. America is a corporation. All you have to do is research it. This is why shows like these are so important. This is why we have to sound Reveille and, you know, talk about the real problems. And everybody wants to talk about the color, you know, of the living room. Like, you know, they're arguing about the paint that we're going to use for the living room, but they're not talking about the foundation of the house that's cracked. They're not, you know, because government does not want you knowing about the foundation that's cracked.
Okay.
I'll show you a good example. One person on social media, and I was so proud to be a part of this, when we were talking about Standing Rock and the aggression at Standing Rock, one person said to me, like he thought he knew what he was talking about. He said, okay, so why haven't the natives stood up for themselves? Why haven't they fought back? Why aren't they doing anything? And I could tell I was being set up, okay? So I let a little bit of time go by, then there was a quiet period, and I knew what I was going to answer, so I didn't want the person to think I was just going to retaliate. And that's another Indian thing. You never, you know, you just be quiet, and, you know, you listen. You don't just hear what the person says. You listen to it without the need of fighting back, right? So I answered. I said, you know, in Indian tradition, if you retaliate the same way that your aggressor does, especially in situations where you present yourself as nonviolent to begin with, like in Standing Rock, you sink to their level. You're no better than they are.
Okay.
There's no difference between you and them. But in silence, in prayer, and letting them know what they do, you know, I mean, everything was filmed, everything was photographed, everything was documented. By standing down and by being quiet and by praying, you're showing integrity, you're showing honor, you're showing discipline.
Okay.
And that's something that the government has no clue about. They really don't. All they know is about fighting and about conflict. If you're quiet and you're praying, they don't know what to do. They see you as a threat. So what happened? They just made a fool out of themselves at Standing Rock. And it went around the world. Everybody saw the goons with the assault rifles, with grenades, water hoses, in below freezing temperatures, shooting at unarmed water protectors with rubber-coated bullets, aiming at the groin, the genital areas, the backs of people as they ran away, practically severing people's arms and having other people lose their eye, and we have proof of that, which I'm showing. That's all they've done over the years, is aggress and destroy and humiliate and cause genocide for 500 years. This is what the First Nations here have been, you know, they've had to put up with.
So on the flip side, so if we're going to look at both sides of the coin to this, what would have been a better option to resolve the situation?
There's no better option here, because when you really look at it, and this is what I think. Yes, this is opinion, but it is true as well.
I understand.
It's that, you know, the Williston Basin. The what? It's called the Williston Basin. There's over 300 billion barrels of oil and natural gas underneath North and South Dakota and eastern Montana, I believe. I don't have the map in front of me, but it's one of the largest reserves of, you know, natural gas and oil right underneath North Dakota. So, you know, there's talk about, you know, government wanting to just depopulate, and this is Agenda 21. That's not my opinion. You have to look it up as well. David Icke talks about it in phenomenal videos that he has on YouTube. Something else that comes to mind too, which I really have to mention, and I'm so glad that, you know, we talked about it and I shared it with you. The true matriarchs that assert themselves and put an end to a crisis. The Oka crisis in the middle of the summer of 1990 in Oka, Quebec, just south of Montreal in Canada. There was an expansion of an existing golf course that was suggested, going onto native sovereign land again, ancient and sacred burial grounds. Let's have a listen to this.
Good evening. At one point, there were as many as 12 native barricades in Quebec, but tonight only one is still standing. It's the one that triggered the whole dispute, the one that Quebec police tried to storm 53 days ago, the one in Oka. Mohawks erected that barricade last March. They were trying to prevent the town from expanding a 9-hole golf course on what they claim is ancestral land. Tonight, the barricade is completely surrounded by the Canadian Army. The soldiers have dug themselves in after a day of high tension and drama. It all began at about 1 o'clock Eastern Time this afternoon. Army units moved in here at a location the Mohawks refer to as the North Pole. Soldiers also took this barricade on the western edge of the community. Then they pressed on toward the final blockade. It all seemed pretty easy, that is, until they reached the center of the Indian land and things came to a dramatic climax. The CBC's Neil MacDonald was there.
Instead of moving on the Oka barricades by road, the Army chose the terrain it likes best, the forest, moving in from behind, coming in the back way. When they rolled, it was swift. The warriors met them on a dirt road deep inside the Indian territory.
We're gonna start swinging our tell these fuckers where to go. Come on! Come on! Fuck! Come on!
The infantry major in charge made it clear he was heading for the barricades at any cost and that bullets would be met with bullets.
As soon as I'm able to move forward, I move forward.
Are you moving right through to the barricades?
There's a barricade down there? Yes, sir. I've taken 3 barricades now.
The warriors were nearing hysteria at the sight of soldiers near their tribal cemetery.
Somebody give me fucking permission to slug that fucking guy. Get back! Get back! Hey!
Then something remarkable. Mohawk women assumed command and cleared their men.
You get back, stay back, I'll fucking kick your ass.
Run! Shoot! Shoot, you fucker!
Get him out of here!
Shoot! Hey! Come on! Come on! Hey! Come on, then!
The warriors calmed down, although not much, and they took to taunting the soldiers face to face.
I must be number 1 on your list, eh? Or you're number 1 on my list, too. A bit nervous, perhaps?
See, but in the matriarchal societies, the men who follow it, they're so honorable. They learn that way. They learn how to be that way. They learn how to respect women. They learn how to respect the food. They learn how to respect the earth that they walk on. It's a completely different way of looking at things. And if you're a sensitive person like I am, see, that's why I was introduced to it. It just came naturally. Mm-hmm. I started doing 4-day fasts with the Indian people there.
Okay.
Close to where I was. I was assisting in ceremonies.
Okay.
Huge talking circles, and you don't have the right to speak if you're not holding the sacred object that's going to be passed around.
Oh, okay.
You learn something that the Lakota learn when they're young. They learn how to be quiet. They learn the sacredness of silence and how not to talk. It's the list is endless, but you know, in situations like Standing Rock, all they do is they, you know, the Indian continuously has to learn how to look away, how to protect themselves, and you know, they're just being aggressed in ways that are just unfathomable. They're hard to speak of. They're hard to imagine. But Standing Rock was a really good example of that, and the whole world saw it.
So, you know, I'm thinking about different conflicts and with the different types of societies that there are, and including sub-societies. And so I'm just thinking with that, how would these different types of cultures be able to embrace something different than what they're used to? And when we're looking at especially conflicts with other countries that we ourselves have, and I think we are less in a position of being so overpowering. We are a powerful nation, and we do speak up when we need to speak up, so to speak. But when you're talking about some countries that have had hundreds of years of conflict over, you know, territory or different things like that, how do you bridge that, or how would that particular culture begin to embrace such either one less abrasive society or going into a matriarchal matriarchal society?
That's a big one. See, and right now there are so many big entities, of the biggest entities in the world that are fighting to destroy what's left. It's practically impossible to have a good person in government, because as soon, look what happened to JFK. JFK wanted to dismantle the Federal Reserve and put the money back to the people rather than private banks. A lot of people are saying that that's one of the reasons, the big reasons why he got killed. Love is the opposite. Love doesn't work that way. And it's you have to have room for love to build, because love doesn't fight, love doesn't argue, love doesn't go to war. Wars are big business now. Everybody's profiting from it, you know, and you see the difference, and that's why love just crosses its arms and doesn't say anything. I have a really good example, if I can finish the show with like love. I have a really good quote that I'd like to share with you.
Absolutely.
And I'm sorry I can't give credit to the person who wrote it, and I probably will in the comments later on when I find out who it was. It just disappeared. This is what he says. He says, you can connect, just think about world affairs when I say this, okay? You can connect from all different kinds of places. Energetic harmony, sexual alchemy, intellectual alignment, but it will never sustain love over a lifetime. You need a thread that goes deeper, that moves below and beyond the shifting sands of compatibility. The thread is fascination, a genuine fascination with someone's inner world, the way they organize reality, the way they articulate their feelings, an unfathomable and bottomless depth of their being. You hear their cries, you hear their soul cry out to you again and again. You never lose interest in what they're trying to convey. And, you know, it's there that when, you know, there'll still be love when the body sickens, when sexuality fades, when the perfection projecting is long shattered. If there is that, then you'll swim in love's waters till the last breath.
Wow.
See? Okay, that's not, that's polar opposite to patriarchal. That's polar opposite to the way we think. We're out there, McCain is out there rolling up his sleeves, going into Syria. Oh, that was great that we threw 59 missiles in their front yard. That's why there's no balance.
I think I understand, because the lack of love and the lack of respect and a huge amount of fear.
Compassion, the lack of compassion. Yes.
For their lives, including their own.
Exactly. And they think they're untouchable. And they are, because they have a bigger army. See, and this was the idea at Standing Rock again. They had to be, you know, assault rifles, tanks that come out of Iraq. They had the LRAD sonar weapons, and they're unarmed water protectors. It's a perfect example. There's that's where the imbalance, I should say. So
I would definitely like to see a lot more balance in just about every aspect of life. I mean, it is not a healthy thing to be living a one-sided relationship, no matter who is involved or how big or small that it is.
Freeze on that thought. Freeze on that thought. You know what they say? When you have to play detective in a relationship, it's over. You may as well forget it.
That's true.
I've been playing detective for 30 years with my government.
Well, you know, my thought is, if there is, you know, someone at the top of the food chain that's pulling the strings on all these different areas, and they're not necessarily living here in the United States, it's really hard if you have people that don't understand this concept to be angry. I don't want to live in anger at all, and I love the country that we live in. I feel very sadness and a lot of compassion, and my heart just goes out to people that are having to be in the other countries in a situation where they live in constant fear, and you know, they're afraid to come out of their house because they don't know if there's going to be a bomb or if someone's going to you know, rape, rob, or steal. And it's just, it's a really sad situation when you have to think on those terms. And while I don't always agree with everything, I would say with what we do or decisions that people make or anything else like that, I would like to see solutions come to the table to address the ways to find just a peaceful remedy to so many different situations. And that goes from, like we talked about, utilizing an analogy of an abuser and a victim, no matter what scale it's on. It would be great. And the biggest challenge when it comes to domestic violence is you sometimes can't get to the heart of the abuser and educate that person to change their behaviors. And when we talk about this as a country, we are dealing with countries that don't have the same philosophies that we do. And this is huge. I would love to see resolution. It's great if we can look back on different types of tragedies that have occurred from world wars to not only our own, but to other countries, and including inner turmoil. What was the resolution to that? And utilize those things as an example on how to find peaceful resolutions.
There's one person, I don't remember her name, it's a long name too, but she says she likes talking with her hands a lot, and she says that peaceful resolutions have never, a peaceful outcome has never come by the oppressed people trying to plead to the moral sense and dignity of the people that are oppressing them. It's like talking two different languages, like we were saying. My instant reaction when I saw 9/11 the first time was, you know, what took them so long? You know, like, wow, like, you know, this is the first time that we're seeing somebody else, you know, attack the United States, because my heart knew, without my head knowing, that every single terrorist attack in this country was made up to blame someone else. So it was interesting, the reaction I had, because I really thought it was a terrorist attack, but it wasn't. It was made up by our own government in order for us to go invade Iraq on a lie, like Wesley Clark says. So you can't have peace while people are you know, I don't, you know, there's never been an attack on this country by another country, because they're like the Indian. They're showing respect, they're showing integrity, they're showing honor and nonviolence. And we're just bullying other countries into submission because Rothschild gives the order, and they want their central bank in every country on earth. So this is another reason why these world wars are happening. And world wars were happening. Rothschild was actually funding both sides of every war since Napoleon, since 1776 and afterwards. So, you know, there has to be balance, and balance won't be achieved by acting the way this country's acting. And you know, that's why these shows are so important. And it's really beautiful that you can allow the message to get out. And I really appreciate being on your show again. I have to say it.
You're welcome. I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to listen, learn, fact check, and also take an opportunity to get introspective and see what they need to do themselves to become healthier and to have more peaceful relations. I think that is super important. And I want to thank you so much for being here today.
And I thank you too. In closing, what the Indian nations have taught me, if anybody wants to try this, is to go outside, face the sun, and close your eyes and be quiet. And you'll see amazing things happen. If you do that often enough, you'll be amazed at what happens.
I would have to agree. I mean, we live in a world where everything is just instant gratification. The
Yes.
cell phones, ATM machines, drive-throughs. I mean, just everything, and we forget that tranquility comes by being still and listening. And so, I think that was a great message for you to close the show on. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you all for watching today. We offer and invite you an opportunity to share your facts here on Rebecca Sounds Reveille, and you can contact us at thelibertybeacon.com.